Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and as it is foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, we have record-breaking weather events, several countries calling for Assad to step down, and Putin meeting with the president who seemingly everyone wants removed, that is Assad, radioactive waste and its effects, and a man finds freedom from prison a little too late, and the DA who feels justice was served, sentencing a man innocent of the crime committed. But we start off with Hurricane Patricia is due to make landfall very soon, and it's being called a monstrous storm, a Category 5 that has winds of over 235 miles per hour. It is the strongest hurricane ever recorded and is expected to make a catastrophic landfall along Mexico's Pacific coast.
Well, resort cities like Manzanillo and Puerto Vallarta had residents and tourists scurrying for shelter from the storm. From space, the storm is enormous and is expected to bring with it torrential rains into Mexico and parts of Texas. Now, it literally exploded overnight from a tropical storm into a Category 4 hurricane, due in part to the El Nino effect, the unusually warm waters feeding the storm.
We talked a little bit about that in several reports ago about how that El Nino system was much larger than it was previous.
That's right.
So emergency officials went through towns warning people to leave, and even a government official went on television warning of the power of the storm, saying it was strong enough to lift cars, destroy homes, and sweep people away.
The Weather Channel's Brian Norcross said this hurricane is comparable to an EF4 tornado, but huge compared to the size of a normal tornado. And where this comes ashore, we expect, he said, total devastation. Now again, Patricia is the strongest storm ever recorded in the Western Hemisphere. It's more than double the strength of Superstorm Sandy, which landed in New York with winds of 80 miles per hour.
And I remember the amount of rain that brought as well. Hurricane Katrina had winds of 135 miles per hour, and even Hurricane Andrew, a Category 5 hurricane, wasn't this big. It had winds of 165 miles per hour when it made landfall in Florida, and more than 24 people lost their lives in that particular storm.
Well, violence continues in the West Bank as two members of Hamas stabbed an Orthodox Jew in Beit Kamesh, which is raising fears that the group might become more involved in the terror. Now, diplomatic efforts to end the bloodshed have been kicked into high gear with a meeting between John Kerry, Netanyahu, and Federica Mogherini.
Mogherini called for a Middle East Quartet meeting to coordinate efforts and to send a message to the parties to calm down the situation on the ground. Kerry stated, if parties want to try, and I believe they do, he said, want to try to move to a de-escalation, there are a set of choices that are available.
Now, UNESCO has failed to call the Western Wall an integral part of the Alaska Mosque. A final draft resolution was changed and the clause was removed. But UNESCO has approved a resolution criticizing Israel for failing to protect heritage sites and rebuild regions destroyed by the war. The resolution also calls for Israel to stop taking provocative measures that protects the sanctity and integrity of the Alaska Mosque.
The draft resolution was submitted by Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. Tel Aviv has condemned the resolution and called it an endeavor to distort history.
Now, in an interview with CNN, an Arab-Israeli TV anchor, who is also a citizen of Israel, spoke about the communication breakdown in Israel and the atmosphere of fear that has developed as a result. Lucy Aharish, said, when you're walking on the streets, you can feel the tension. You can feel that people are afraid. People are looking over their shoulders to see if somebody is coming to stab or kill them. Boy, certainly an uneasy feeling and nobody'd want to, experience.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of fear and distrust in the air. She continued, or to see if someone is going to yell Allah Akbar and start randomly killing people. On the other side, you see Jewish people killing Arab people only because they're Arabs. It seems that Arabs and Jews aren't able anymore to trust each other or listen to each other. People are talking, but no one is listening.
Wow. When you speak of a war, it used to be of Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians. But it's not a war of Israelis and Palestinians anymore. It's a war of religion. She said, war of religion.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Well, she also said, although we, the Israelis and Palestinians, are living on the same land, the lack of diplomacy and a peace initiative is creating a vacuum. And when you have a vacuum, you have terror and are giving a stage to extremists from both sides.
Right. And when you don't have leaders that are giving you something to control, who don't have a path or direction, when you don't have a mother and a father that is telling you, hey, stop doing it because I said so. It seems like we're starting to act like children, like terrorist children, doing whatever we want and whenever we want because nobody is telling us not to. So it looks like her statement is that we're lacking the moral guidance that we need so that we can make better decisions.
Absolutely. She said she used to tell people that what you see on the news isn't true. We don't go around stabbing each other, but now we are. We are killing each other. We've lost control, and it seems like the United States isn't doing anything about it. Now, she concluded maybe the United States has given up on us, and maybe our leaders, speaking of the Arabs and Jewish alike, have also given up on us.
Oh, sad state. Well, in other news, the Quartet said recently significant steps must be taken to reach a two-state solution. Federica Mogherini, the EU foreign policy chief, said the Quartet condemns all acts of terror and violence towards civilians and reiterates its call for maximum restraint of provocative and rhetoric action. Quartet envoys plan to visit the region soon in an effort to engage both sides to try to restore confidence and to move towards a two-state solution.
Now, Russia's foreign minister has met with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in Vienna about a peaceful solution to the Syrian crisis and to discuss whether other countries in the region, as well as major international powers, should get involved.
U.S. State Department spokesman John Kirby addressed reporters recently, speaking of a meeting with Russia's Lavrov, saying that it was for the purpose of getting at a political transition in Syria. Well, the U.S., Turkey, and Saudi Arabia want Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to step down. But Russia has been stepping up the military support for the Assad administration.
Vladimir Putin met with Assad recently in Moscow and spoke on the phone the following day to the leaders of both countries of Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Observers say Putin is trying to take the initiative on Syria, showing support for Assad while also willing to talk with countries backing the Syrian opposition.
Well, for more on the meeting between Presidents Assad and Putin, we shift over now to our correspondent, Larry McGee. Larry, was President Bashar al-Assad's meeting with Putin a scheduled event, or are the reports of it being somewhat a surprise really true? What's the latest on that there, Larry?
The reports are still that the meeting was unannounced, but President Putin and his welcoming council showed no signs of being put off about it. The two leaders are reported to have discussed their current battle against terrorism, as well as the air assaults being carried out by Moscow on the Syrian government's behalf. In televised comments, President Putin stated that the Syrian people practically by themselves have been fending off and fighting against international terrorism for several years now. He went on to say say that Syria has been experiencing serious losses, but lately it has been achieving serious positive results. President Assad then contributed his thanks to the Russian leader, expressing appreciation on behalf of the Syrian people for Moscow standing up for the ancient nation and its independence. He went on to say that if not for the intervention of Russia, terrorism in the region would have spread even further to an even greater amount of countries. The grouping of countries which collectively make up the North Atlantic Treaty Organization are not as appreciative of Moscow's efforts, however, with NATO Deputy Secretary General Alexander Vershbow stating that since Russia's objectives in the region differ from that of the U.S. and its confederates, its air raids run the risk of creating an incident which could get out of hand. America and its cronies are said to be upset that Moscow has targeted the insurgents seeking to overthrow the Syrian government and have responded by pushing the pawn of Turkey, leveling claims that the Kremlin's actions have violated Turkish airspace. Washington has lent its voice directly to the conflict, with the president stating this week that where the Orthodox nation is concerned, there is no meeting of the minds in terms of strategy, but his hope is that as Russia starts to realize that they are not going to be able to bomb their way into a peaceful situation inside Syria, that America will then be able to make progress on that front. The reported effectiveness of Moscow's precision strikes, however, is said to be producing skepticism with respect to the sincerity of American efforts, since it has also been bombing inside Syria itself for quite some time now. Persia, one of Syria's few allies in the region, has also come forward to denounce the approach of Saudi Arabia towards other countries in and around the great river Euphrates as being destructive. Persia's foreign ministry spokesperson delivered the remarks after the Saudi foreign minister threatened to confront Tehran if it fails to give up its continued aggression on the kingdom. Iran responded by calling the comments indecent and undiplomatic and noted that such an approach has plagued some countries such as Yemen and Syria with war and extremism. The precious commodity of oil, which is synonymous with the nations of the Tigris and Euphrates region, is believed to be headed towards a plunge from which it will not soon return. The banksters of Goldman Sachs are reporting that crude will dip to $20 a barrel, which represents a fall of 50% from recent prices. The global oil surplus, slowing demand, and a lack of storage space are being labeled as potential causes, but OPEC is apparently completely disinterested in cutting production. As a countermove, U.S. experts are suggesting a decrease in oil production among non-OPEC nations in an effort to offset the excess and rebalance the market. Amid the competition, U.S. oil has dropped by 2%, the latest low in the ups and downs of the petro wars. War online is also a concern as hackers reportedly stole into the personal email of the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Private and potentially sensitive information was allegedly posted to the net by a high schooler who says that he hacked into Director Brenner's personal email account by tricking AOL and Verizon to disclose enough information to reset his password. The hacker reportedly posted a list of names and emails of present and former intelligence personnel, but apparently had enough decency to blank out their social security numbers. The incident is being labeled as an embarrassment and an alarming indication that there is nothing secure about email. The perils of the present day are not just limited to the technology stemming from the increase in knowledge, however. Here in the States, the Centers for Disease Control has launched an investigation to determine the source of an increase in what are said to be several very rare forms of cancer. Curiosity's spotlight is on a county just outside of St. Louis this week, which includes a stream called Coldwater Creek. For 2 decades, 2 sites have been maintained along the creek to store radioactive waste from America's nuclear weapons program. The waste is said to be produced by Mallinckrodt in St. Louis, which was hired by the government to process uranium. Tens of thousands of barrels of nuclear waste were produced by the chemical company and are stored along the stream, some of them wide open and exposed to the elements. The sites are now believed to have contaminated the waters of Coldwater Creek and its surrounding soil and served as a catalyst for cancer in many of its residents. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, both Assad and Putin definitely key players in the situation over there in the Middle East.
That's right. We'll see how that turns out.
Well, imagine what it would be like spending almost half of your life on death row for a crime you didn't even commit. Well, this is exactly what took place in the case of Glenn Ford from Shreveport, Louisiana. At age 65, he was exonerated for the murder of a local jeweler, Isidore Rosman, when the real murderer admitted to the crime.
Wow. Mr. Rosman, the jeweler, had been robbed before his death, and Ford, who had done yard work for Rosman, had admitted to pawning some of the stolen jewelry. Well, even though the case against Glenn Ford was weak with no physical evidence linking him to the crime itself, the odds were against him. His court-appointed lawyers had never practiced criminal law, and the district attorney at the time, Marty Stroud, was determined to get a conviction to boost his career regardless of any possibility of the man's innocence.
Stroud got a quick conviction, putting together an all-white jury who reached a decision within 3 hours of deliberation. Ford was sentenced to death row at Angola, Louisiana's maximum security prison. Also referred to as the Alcatraz of the South, Angola is known for its harsh penalties and even harsher conditions.
Wow. Well, after spending most of his life in a 5-by-7 cell, nearly 30 years later, Glenn Ford was released. However, at age 65, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and he was told he only had a few months to live. He has been denied any compensation for his wrongful imprisonment, with the exception of a $20 gift card Ford was given upon release. So I don't know how far he would actually get with something like that.
In a recent interview by 60 Minutes, Dale Cox, the district attorney who helped get Ford exonerated, was asked if there could be any compassion given to Mr. Ford for having been on death row for so many years unfairly. He said, "I'm not in the compassion business. None of us as prosecutors or defense lawyers are in the compassion business."
We're in the legal business, he continued. So to suggest that somehow what happened to Glenn Ford is abhorrent, yes, it's unfair, but it's not illegal, and it's not even immoral. It just doesn't fit your perception of fairness, he continued. Well, Ford is one of 156 death row inmates who have been exonerated since 1973. He did die in hospice, Mr. Ford did, due to his illness in June of this year. And to get the entire story on Glenn Ford's case, you can go to CBS 60 Minutes and watch 30 years on death row.
Well, I agree with Mr. Dale Cox. The legal system today is not in the compassion business. With over 2.2 million prisoners incarcerated in the United States and a recidivism rate of 57%, it's plain to see that our justice system in general needs a change. Ever ask yourself why our societies seem to sink lower and lower in morality while crime, diseases, disrespect, and the "I don't care" attitude continues to increase? What has mankind rejected, pushed aside, disregarded that has brought us to this point we're at today? Well, if you find the answer to that question, you'll find the answer to all your questions. Yisrael Hawkins, overseer of the House of Yahweh, is the only individual that has the knowledge to pull mankind out of this pit of immorality that is plaguing our societies today. Well, contact the House of Yahweh today and request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Find the answer to the question we ask, what has mankind rejected? Then go to ypnnews.com, click on the Contact Us tab, and send us your answer. We look forward to hearing from you.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494 or visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also check out our new website, www.ypnnews.com, And to email the House of Yahweh, send your emails to info@yahweh.com. And for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another enlightening message from Yeshua Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.